Before we start, just a few notes on what to expect. This video is aimed to be educational. Due to the broad nature of people accessing this information, it won't be tailored to individual circumstances. This video is part of a series that will cover all different topics about sensory processing. Watching the full series will give you a greater understanding of sensory processing. The aim of this video is to build on our understanding of our 8 sensory systems. We'll now think about how we process the sensory information received from our 8 sensory systems. We will explain what we mean by sensory processing, and try to understand what sensory processing differences can look and feel like. These are our 8 sensory systems. If you haven't already, you might like to go back and watch the Our Senses video and read the sensory systems worksheets. You've already heard about how our bodies and the environment send our brains information. Through our senses, we process and organize this information in our brains. Our brains help us prioritize, organize, and understand this information to allow us to respond with a thought, emotion, or behavior. This is sensory processing. Let's think of an example of how we receive, process, and respond using our sensory processing. Let's think of a child who is thirsty. They'll register that feeling of thirst from within their body. This is using their interoceptive sensory system. They may then use their visual sensory system to scan the room and locate their cup. When they get to their cup, they may use their visual sensory system again to notice that it's very full. They will then use their sense of body awareness or their proprioceptive sensory system to help them judge how much force to lift that cup up with. Reaching the cup up to their mouth will also use their sense of body awareness or their proprioceptive sensory system. As they won't be able to see where their mouth is, they'll need to judge where their mouth is to be able to drink successfully. We're processing sensory information from the environment and from our bodies, all of the time, automatically, often without needing to think about it. We're all individuals, so it's important to remember that we receive and process sensory information slightly differently from one another. While we're all sitting here listening to this video, some of us might notice background noises, for example, a clock ticking, and some of us might not. We've just talked about how we're all individual with our sensory processing. That's okay, and these differences make us who we are. More often than not, these differences don't impact our day-to-day lives, or if they do, we can overcome them ourselves quite easily. For example, some of us don't like feeling labels in our clothes, so we might cut them out. Sometimes, however, these differences can cause interruptions in our daily life, and we do need help from our family and those around us to help us make adjustments. Now we're going to start thinking about the processing part of our sensory information, and we're going to start thinking about our neurological thresholds. This is all happening in our brains, so remember, we have our 8 sensory systems, all receiving information, being processed, and contributing to an outcome. For this slide, we're just thinking about the processing part. When we think about a low neurological threshold, this means it doesn't take much information from the sensory system to solicit a response. So you have a very little cup and it fills up very quickly. It doesn't take much information for your brain to notice it and register it. When we think about the high neurological threshold, this means that you need a lot more information from that sensory system to register it. So you have a very big cup, which needs more to fill it up. Any sensory system can be in threshold. You may have a little cup for touch and a big cup for auditory. Typical then falls within the middle. It's important to know that there may be fluctuations in all of us throughout our days. When we wake up, we may start a little bit under-responsive, so we may need more information to register what's happening around us. But when we wake up, get showered, and have some food, we might move into more of our just right, ready-to-go zone. It's also important to know that other things can impact our thresholds, like how tired or hungry we are, or if we're feeling a bit worried. You may be someone who needs to turn the radio off to be able to park the car. This just means that at that time, it's too much to process the auditory information, whilst concentrating on the car. Another example might be if you've had a bad night's sleep and things that normally wouldn't bother you, such as the radio being on in the background, might actually be a little bit annoying that morning, suggesting it's just too much sensory information on that morning.
I like classical music. I like to read comics. I also like to go to school. Something that I know a lot about and want to tell you about is sensory processing disorder. SPD is when the messages that your brain gets from your senses are not organized, so you don't respond to things like most people do. This makes it hard to do everyday life stuff like getting ready for the day, going to school, eating, and playing. You can have SPD by itself, or you can have it with other things like autism. I have autism and SPD. Everyone has 7 sensory systems. They are sound, taste, smell, vision, touch, proprioceptive, and vestibular. Under-responsive versus over-responsive. You can think of your sensory systems as being a cup, and water is that type of a sensory input. If you are under-responsive to a certain sensory input, it is like you're a big, huge cup. You keep getting water to the big cup. You can just keep adding, but it never feels full. But if you are over-responsive, it is like you are a tiny cup. All you need is just a little sensory input and you overflow. You want your cup to be full and not spill over. Each of your sensory systems is their own cup and they are different sizes. Just because you have one big cup does not mean you are under-responsive with all your senses. I have a big cup for my proprioceptive and vestibular senses and a little cup for my touch, sound, taste, and smell senses. Everyone is different and unique. Some days and times of days are good, and some are too much for me. I don't like loud and busy places. I cover my ears and want to run away or yell and tell everyone to be quiet. I need less noise to feel in control of my body. I like to always be moving. I have a hard time holding still. I don't like people to touch my skin sometimes. But everyone is different. My brother doesn't mind if people touch him, and he does not need to wear sunglasses. It is important to know your own body and to understand your body and your 7 senses.
Please watch this video. Let's think a little more about our little cup of being over-responsive. So remember, our little cup doesn't take much sensory information to fill up. This is also referred to as having a low threshold or being over-responsive. This is the blue line you can see on the graph in front of you. If you have a little cup, you might hear sounds that others can't hear, be sensitive to light, or find certain textures uncomfortable. Remember that you might have a little cup for just one of your sensory systems. We can describe people who are over-responsive as being sensitive to this sensory input. Individuals can vary in how much they respond. Some may be cautious and fearful. Others may use more extreme methods such as running away to avoid the sensory input. It can be really hard to imagine how someone else may interpret sensory information as being scary, when it's something that we are not fearful of. Please watch this video. It will hopefully help you to understand how others can process sensory information differently to yourself.
Two, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
Take my hand.
No, Alex.
naughty. I'm autistic, and I just get too much information.
Remember, when we think about our little cups or our over-responsiveness, this is our low threshold, and this means it doesn't take much sensory information before we register it. Here are some examples of how people can experience a little cup in different sensory systems. If we have a little cup for our tactile system, we might dislike the labels in our clothes. Our new school shoes might feel stiff and uncomfortable, or we may avoid certain food textures. If we have a little cup for our vestibular sensory system, you might get dizzy quickly and feel very sick on playground equipment or fairground rides. If we have a little cup for our auditory or our sound sensory system, you might dislike being in a loud classroom or find going to the cinema tricky. If we have a little cup for our olfactory, which is our smell sensory system, we may not like being in the kitchen when meals are being cooked. Please remember that there may be other causes for the choices and behaviors that you see. It may not necessarily be for a sensory processing reason, but this can be one of the considerations. It's also important to remember that even if we do have a little cup for one of our sensory systems, it may not always have an impact on our day-to-day lives. Remember the example of having a small cup for our smell sensory system. If we can move ourselves away from the unpleasant smell, it doesn't need to have an impact on us. Now let's think a little more about our big cup, or being under-responsive. This is also referred to as having a high threshold. So remember, our big cup takes a lot more sensory information to fill it up. This is the orange line you see on the graph in front of you. If you're under-responsive or have a high threshold, you may not notice noises around you or hear your name being called. You may not appear to see things that other people do, or you may not notice when you've hurt yourself. We can describe people who are under-responsive as maybe not noticing things as much. But remember, individuals can vary in how they respond. Some may really want to fill up their cup and therefore may look for sensory input to do this, whereas others may not. Remember, when we think about our big cup, we're under-responsive. This is our high threshold, and this means it takes a lot more sensory information before it's registered. These are some examples of how people can experience a big cup in different sensory systems. On the left, you can see examples of those who are not looking to fill up their cup. These people might look like a bystander, onlooker, or a bit of a daydreamer. They may bump into things, or you might describe them as clumsy, and they might not notice if their hands and face are dirty. On the right, you can see examples of those who are looking to fill up their big cup. These people might be looking for movement and climbing, sometimes with no fear. They might touch everything, smell everything, and really enjoy and look for getting messy. Or they may seek out noises. While the focus of this video has been on understanding sensory processing, we do need to remember that not every challenge will be because of a sensory processing difference. This is where it's important to think about every aspect of your child and what else might be impacting them. Thank you for listening about sensory processing. You might now want to look at our sensory toolkit on the website, or refer to our sensory worksheets.